So we're going to continue our discussion of treatment approaches by looking into motivational enhancement therapy. So motivational enhancement therapy kind of starts with this conventional wisdom that we have about substance abusers. And the conventional wisdom tells us that most people who are abusing substances tend to deny their status as an abuser when they're approached, and that users have to get to this place of truly devastating consequences. This idea of hitting rock bottom before they'd be able to seek help. So this conventional wisdom approach tells us that we need to stop, quote unquote, enabling the abuser. We have to stop solving their problems for them. This is a spouse calling into work for their partner because they're unable to take care of their responsibilities at work, or maybe bailing a child out of jail. This whole idea of letting the user suffer the consequences of their actions. So if we look at this, unfortunately, if we take this approach to dealing with people who are abusers, then there's the strong possibility that there could be some very, very serious consequences for the user before that person hits whatever they may consider their own rock bottom. So motivational enhancement therapy is going to try to shift the focus away from the person confronting their status and being able to accept it or deny it, and actually looking instead at motivation for the user to start changing their behavior. So motivational enhancement therapy starts with this idea of motivational interviewing. And what it is basically is a process of helping the abuser by determining where they currently stand in terms of this idea of stages of change, and then helping them to move forward. So when we talk about stages of change, if you've ever taken a class on any kind of health behavior change, or specifically within the public health field, you'd be familiar with these stages. And they're basically 5 stages that this approach is based on: pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, and then action and maintenance. We talk about this in terms of people quitting smoking, talking about people beginning to incorporate physical activity into their day. Lots of ways that we can use this concept of stages of change to discuss health behaviors. But in this particular setting, we're talking about somebody who is a substance abuser, and how these stages of change might apply to them. So that first stage, pre-contemplation, the individual doesn't acknowledge or recognize that a problem exists. So the motivational interviewer is working with the abuser, and they're talking to them about their drinking behavior if the person has a problem with alcohol. And the person doesn't acknowledge that there's a problem at all. They think that what they're doing is fine. They don't have any concerns about their actions or consequences. And we call this stage pre-contemplation. Now, the next stage, contemplation, is where that person starts to move towards the recognition that there may be a problem with the way they're behaving. Maybe they're starting to see problems in their workplace. Maybe they're starting to see problems with their relationships. Maybe they're starting to suffer some legal consequences. Maybe they got a DUI after driving home after a night of drinking. So the person has acknowledged that there's a problem, and they're beginning to start to consider the possibility that they may want to change. Now, in preparation, the individual is actually going to decide to change. And this is where it's not necessarily that they are making the change at that stage, but they're making the preparations in their life. They're trying to decide, they're trying to take care of the things they need to change in order to make that change effective in their lives. And then the next step, action, this would be where the person is actually taking active steps towards changing. Maybe they're making alternate plans on Friday nights. Maybe they are trying to find a healthier group of friends. Maybe they're trying to change other parts of their lives, the people, places, and things associated with their substance abuse problem. And then maintenance, the individual is engaging in activities that are meant to help maintain the change. So they didn't decide that they're going to drink, take a couple of weeks off from hanging out with their drinking friends, and then go back. But they're actually engaging in productive activities during that time frame that will help them to maintain their lifestyle change. So those 5 stages of change in motivational enhancement therapy, the goal of the therapist, the motivational interviewer in this process, would be to help the person move from one stage to the next. So you'll note that there's no stage here where the person actually has to admit that they are dependent that they're an addict, that they're an abuser. They just have to recognize that there's a problem, that they might be a problem drinker, which somehow has a different connotation than being that whole idea of being an alcoholic or an addict. So it can be a way to help people who aren't necessarily ready to make that admission in their life, and help them move along those stages of change to a point where they have a healthier relationships and are possibly substance-free in their lives. So motivational enhancement therapy is one of our treatment methods. And then another one is contingency management. So this is a really interesting idea that instead of talking about the negative behavior, the abusing behavior, contingency management focuses on rewarding being drug-free. So the basic idea of the approach is that individuals who are able to remain drug-free, and it is based on a urine test, that they receive rewards, and that the value of those rewards is actually going to increase as with the longer the amount of time that they're drug-free. Now, we don't just put people out there and say, good luck with that. They also participate in weekly skill-building sessions, and it's interesting to note that this very different approach has actually produced results. We do see a consistent reduction in use from people who take this approach. Now, the weakness here is going to be the cost of those rewards. It can get to be an expensive program, excuse me, and there may be this concept of fairness. If you maybe just think about it, say within your family, and you as a teen didn't smoke and your sibling did, and your parents started to reward your sibling for not smoking, but they never rewarded you for never starting. You can see how that principle of fairness can be troubling for some people. When we do see this program implemented as part of the idea of the therapeutic workplace, we actually see that that participants are able to replace the drug-using behaviors with employable skills. So they may be able to take over the cost of those own rewards in their own lives by being able to be gainfully employed. And an interesting thing to note about this idea of the therapeutic workplace program is it's actually one of, unfortunately, a very few programs that are certified or placed on the Registry of Effective Programs by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration of the United States government. So it's a list of programs that are considered highly effective. So something to think about, even though we haven't heard much about, most of us at least have not heard much about this program. This may actually be a very helpful approach. So our final psychosocial approach to drug treatment is this idea of cognitive behavioral therapy. Cognitive behavioral therapy is another therapeutic approach that is not, like the stages of change, isolated to substance abuse therapy. Is actually used in a wide variety of areas, including depression and also eating disorders. So cognitive behavioral therapy takes the approach that people don't just need to start to think about things differently if they want to change their behavior, but they actually need new behavioral skills. So it combines those two tools. And the goal is that for people who participate, to be able to identify and change the behaviors that could lead them to relapse. So for someone who is maybe working through cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT as it's abbreviated, in terms of their relationship with food or an eating disorder, they may start to talk about basic things like, having a snack in the car when they start driving home from work so they don't hit the drive-thru on the way because they're starving. If you put this in the context of somebody who's a substance abuser, maybe they're actually helping that person to build their refusal skills that they may never have learned as a teenager. An interesting approach with CBT is, an interesting fact is that it actually has, again, proven to be a very effective approach. Now, we talk about people who use CBT to combat depression. Depression is one of those mental health issues that can keep a person in therapy for years. Whereas somebody who goes through the CBT approach for depression may learn very, very basic tools, like the idea that having your face form a smile can lead to changes in neurotransmitter levels and actually improve your mood, whether you felt like smiling in the first place or not. When we talk about the idea of using CBT skills, it can be a shorter time in therapy because it's possibly focused more on the end result rather than the means of getting there. And it has actually been shown to be a very effective approach to therapy. Now, there were some concerns in the early stages of using CBT in the substance abuse setting, is that whole idea of analyzing and changing behavior may be very difficult for people who have been long-term drug users and may have suffered some damage to their cognitive abilities, their ability to think these sort of things through as a result of their drug use. But our most recent evidence suggests, when we evaluate these programs, that this concern is unfounded, and that actually CBT can remain a very effective approach for people who'd like to change their substance using behaviors. And it has become one of our most widely used treatments in the field. So that'll wrap up our discussion of psychosocial therapies, and our next lecture will move on to drug-based or pharmacotherapies.